Hello, I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO at the CCMA, and I'm joined today by Jon Yarlett, who is the founder and CEO of Intelligent Sourcing and the Impact Sourcing Alliance. And the reason I've asked Jon to come and have a chat with me live on LinkedIn is because I'm hearing a lot about impact sourcing. I've got all sorts of people knocking on my door, asking me about it. Can we support it? And I thought this would be a fantastic opportunity to ask the man who seems to know a lot more about impact sourcing than most, and find out what it is and why it's something that contact center industry leaders should be aware of, and how can they support it, help it. Welcome, Jon. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and before anything, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity and the platform. We are always more than happy to speak about impact sourcing and try and spread the message of good, as it were. So thank you so much for having us.
An absolute pleasure. And I have to start with this term, impact sourcing. What is it? What does it mean? And let's start there. Why has it become popular all of a sudden?
So it's an interesting one. Impact sourcing as a term is being used globally, probably more so globally than within the UK. People and companies and enterprise and vendors in the UK no doubt still do it, but it's known to them and known more in the UK as falling under CSR or ESG or DEI. So it kind of fits in with that. A lot of organizations are investors in people, or they've signed up to schemes like Positive About Disabled People, but they may not know it as impact sourcing. A lot of conversations I have are, what is impact sourcing? And I tell them, and they say, oh, we actually do that. We just don't call it impact sourcing. So let me start by saying what impact sourcing isn't, because there's two things I always like to get out there. Impact sourcing is not charity. So let's just be completely clear. We are not standing there with begging bowls out saying, please, for the sake of jobs, can you just give people jobs? We are not saying, please, can you help it? We are not saying you're going to get subsidized or funded in any way, shape or form. We're also not saying impact sourcing is cost savings or anything like that on the front of it. What we are saying is impact sourcing is essentially providing meaningful opportunity, whether that's jobs or training or revenue streams or growth or career paths, to marginalized communities, to communities around the globe, whether they be army leavers, whether they be single parent families, carers, refugees, disabled people, ex-incarcerated people, people around the country, around the world that need the opportunity. We've got, as you know, a massive war on talent. Vendors should be looking, and companies, in fact, should be looking at different ways of inclusive hiring and different ways of recruitment. So that's what we're looking at, essentially, providing opportunity for marginalised communities.
I love it. I love it. Now I know why this is such an important thing for our industry.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a massive thing. And just quickly, I mean, it's not something that's like an overnight fad or something because it's the right thing to do. I know we're specifically talking about UK and Europe, but if you look at the US, Bill Clinton has the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Foundation. And part of that foundation specifically looks at impact sourcing and how we can create 500,000 jobs by 2026 through inclusive hiring, and they are well on their way to doing that.
Love it. So what's the benefit of impact sourcing so I completely get it in terms of giving everybody equal opportunities and having the opportunity to get themselves a job, get themselves a career, regardless of their background or their circumstances. Completely get that. From a business perspective, what's the benefits of impact sourcing? And in a minute, I'm going to ask you for some examples, but what's the benefit to the business?
Okay, so first of all, I would say that I think that buyers so both sides of the spectrum, when we talk about buyers and sellers, everyone is more, I think, socially conscious. We look at things like, and we're hearing a lot of terms around supplier diversity. So enterprise side, not necessarily always going for the household names in terms of BPOs or ITOs, but really looking at, different diverse suppliers and trying to, I guess, lift those up. We also look at different locations and where you need to be. And I think the psyche now in terms of buying is a lot different to how it was 10 years ago in terms of just going for the usual suspects.
And when you say the buying, are you talking in terms of in-house contact center leaders that are looking to use outsourcers?
Yeah.
And so therefore the buyer is the in-house contact center leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the buyer, so on the enterprise side, so the buyer being, as you said, the in-house contact center, when they're looking at outsourcing, they're often looking at supply diversity, or they're often looking at, where they can be good, where they can make a difference. And a lot of this is down to accountability. A lot of this, we're all accountable, whether it's to customers or stakeholders or shareholders, or in some cases, unfortunately, the public and the press. So you want to be seen to be doing well. Equally, as an industry, when we talk about outsourcing, we know through history that our industry has been bashed to bits, whether it's about data losses or taking people's jobs away, or whatever it may be. And what people aren't necessarily talking about is the job creation. So the job creation is probably second to none. The other benefits include lower attrition, which is quite an important one. Where you take people through inclusive hiring, often, and this isn't kind of just me saying it, there are facts and figures around this. Often they are more loyal. They want to succeed because they need to succeed. We have, unfortunately, a bit of a trend in the UK, which I don't actually see anywhere else, and I've been to a lot of places, that the contact center industry can be seen as a bit of a stopgap or as a job to do while you're looking for another job. Everywhere else in the world looks at it as a career with great earning potential, great careers. There are hungry people coming out and saying, we want this to be our career. We can go and do it, and we can kind of progress through an organization. So there's all those things as well. And, fundamentally, it's making a difference as well. I think the benefit is that if you're an employer of scale, and whether you are an enterprise client in retail or BFSI or manufacturing, or you are a vendor, I believe there's a responsibility that interestingly, in line with RFPs coming out from the buyer side, that 10, 15, 20% maybe of your employees, where possible, should be through inclusive hiring.
And I guess that although you referenced it's more prolific in outsourcing because of the job creation that we're seeing in outsourcing, actually impact sourcing is also something that in-house contact center leaders could and should be looking at, because of the opportunities that they also have. And like you say, the war on talent, so it actually works for the whole industry, not just in outsourcing.
No, absolutely. And it's something that a lot of kind of in-house are looking at anyway. I mean, a lot of the vendors and the BPOs do it, absolutely. But equally on the in-house side of things, and there are some great examples of organizations that are working with different parts of the community that would normally get overlooked, unfortunately, that would normally kind of get pushed aside. And they're doing some great, amazing things with them as well. Some really, really great success stories. I mean, it's interesting because, as you can tell, I love talking about it. But the more you get into it, you see some most amazing, almost tear-jerking stories of how our industry, in terms of the call and contact center industry, have changed lives. So when you take someone on who's been, who's never been given an opportunity, primarily you're changing that person's life. Secondary, you're changing that person's family's life. And in a lot of cases as well, you're also changing that person's community, because there's now a revenue stream coming into that community that wasn't there. You're giving that person a little bit of kind of hope that actually it's not the end of the world. And so it's difficult for me not to kind of paint a picture that, you know, we're just helping these people to kind of pick people up. We are doing that, but let's be clear, the skills and the talent that these people have it is amazing. You know, when you look at, you know, the skills that someone may have picked up in the armed forces, or the skills that somebody may have acquired before they became, you know, they had to stay at home because they're looking after a family member, or, you know, the opportunities that people have had. It's a great model.
And it's interesting that you said right at the top of the conversation that it's not charitable, and it's not because it's not volunteering. It's not doing it because it is just the right thing to do and a good thing to do. It's actually tapping into a pool of people, a talent pool that has so much to give, so much to offer. And it's actually identifying that talent pool and being able to bring it into the workforce, and therefore making a difference. So I can see why it leans into corporate social responsibility, why it leans into ESG and Deeb, and I completely get all that. But give us some examples. So when we've spoken before, you've talked about examples in South Africa, and I really want to hear about those examples. But I also really want to hear what people are doing in the UK as well, and how you can do impact sourcing in the UK. So go on. I'm going to say, get me crying. Tell me the stories, because I know they're really powerful.
So there's two sides. Firstly, so on the vendor side, so on the BPO vendor side, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, but we champion vendors that operate this type of model, and there are members out there. There are members that we have that have also worked with you as well. So when we go through the likes of, you know, the usual vendors, I don't want to start name dropping.
Yeah, you've got the big PPOs.
But the big people, and you know, whether you go on our website or wherever, you will see them, and they all have programs in place. Some of them are very, very active in working with disabled people. Some of them, I know, I've got one client who's a contact center. And this particular contact center has a whole team of deaf people working in the contact center, doing all the non-voice stuff. So all the chat, all the email, that group of people who you probably thought, well, they'd never work in a contact center. You know, they're doing all this stuff. I've got clients that are doing a lot of outreach projects as well. I'm working with, you know, disadvantaged youth and all across the board. The two examples I want to speak about, which I think are amazing examples, are, first of all, Iceland Foods. Now, Iceland Foods, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say a brand. I'm not sure. But
you just did. So it's fine. It's fine.
So interestingly, they have a scheme now called, I think it's called Doing It Right. And they have a team of people, specifically, they've got a guy there, but they have a team of people that are going into prisons around the country, working with people that are about to be incarcerated, people that are about to be released, working with this group of people and trying to rehabilitate them, trying to identify whether or not they've got potential or skills, and that they want to kind of change and want to go back to work. Obviously, it's not going to be ideal for everyone. And then they're training and taking those people and they're placing them within the company.
Nice.
So,
and you know that concept back in, I think it was about 2018, in the European Contact Centre and Customer Service Awards, there was an organisation that had set up a call centre in a prison, and it was a BPO. They'd set themselves up as BPO, and they were using those that were behind bars to do all of the customer contact. And it was the pandemic that took them out because they had to stop operating in that way. So it is good to hear that is happening still.
Yeah, and it's also happening, and seeing as I've said Iceland, I might as well say Wagamama as well. But it's also happening in the sense that Wagamamas are going into female prisons, and they are training a lot of the inmates again that are about to be released on how to be chefs and on cooking.
Wow.
And that's helping them, and that's not necessarily to place them in their own restaurants. That's to help them get a job potentially in the industry as a whole. That's not to kind of say, well, we're taking this staff, we're going. So
Giving them skills.
Absolutely. And, there's certain, because it's not just, it's not just, and we know this from your industry, we can train people on, if they're working on specific projects or clients, we can train them on the product knowledge and the knowledge about that specific client, but the skills that they would learn in that call and contact center environment, in terms of communication, in terms of team working, in terms of working to deadlines and schedules and things like that, are things you can take anywhere. So if I'm turning around to somebody and saying, look, there's a X amount of individuals that leave the army or the navy every year, that struggle sometimes to get back into mainstream life and mainstream employment. It's a massive pool of untapped labor that is so highly skilled in terms of everything from logistics all the way through, and they're not necessarily being utilized. So what we were seeing now is a lot of recruitment agencies popping up that are specializing in placing different segments of the community. But sorry.
So I was going to say, the two examples you've given there have been tapping into prisons. You talked about a community or a team that are deaf and that they are doing non-voice interactions. I'm also aware that there are programs whereby if you outsource, let's say, I don't know, 10 seats in South Africa, that outsourced organisation is then funding for 10 individuals 10 children in South Africa to go through schooling. Is that right? And how does that work?
So that's one of some South African BPO who we're working with. Can I say their name? I will name drop them, or
go on then. I'll let you.
Okay. So it's a company called Newton who we work with, great company, and they absolutely have a program that they work on with Melon Educate, called One Agent, One Child, where, as you quite rightly said, for every agent that you give them, let's say you give them 10 agents, they will put 10 South African youth through education. And that essentially is almost trying to future-proof the education and the future and of these children that would never normally have it. South Africa is a very interesting one, and I know a lot of we won't dwell on it because we are talking about UK, but I know a lot of your members and clients will have
presence in South Africa
and a presence there. And so it's important to remember that when we talk about impact sourcing, our minds will naturally go to, poorer countries where, we might be talking rural parts of South Africa, rural parts of India, rural parts of Latin America, rural parts of the Philippines, where, yes, there is a massive need. But impact sourcing isn't just about, disadvantaged youth in those regions. We've got areas in the UK, specifically areas like the Highlands and Islands in Scotland and coastal areas that aren't massively populated, and there isn't much opportunity there. And so what a lot of organizations are doing are building hubs in a lot of these areas where 10, 20 people can go to these areas, work, and then they're not having to travel 2-3 hours to get into a major city. And so, the foresight is that there's a lot of people in these regions that aren't being employed, but are highly skilled. And it's how do we, during a war on talent, go out and actively find these people rather than hoping these people are going to come to us? How do we actively go and source top quality labor, top quality potential employees that want to work, want to stay, want to be given an opportunity, are in it for the long haul? And what methods do we now use, thinking outside the box, to find these people whilst doing good?
So you mentioned that there are recruiters that are setting themselves up, and I remember recruiters from 20 years ago that had specialisms in this kind of recruitment. Is it just recruiters? Can they come and talk to you? Is there other organisations that do this in a specialist way, that maybe they are charities? How do you go about doing impact sourcing?
So there's lots of organisations out there that you can investigate. You can go and look at. There's organisations like New Futures. There's organisations who do a lot of this kind of training and placing people. There's a number of organisations globally that are charitable organisations that try to place long-term unemployed youth. And you've also got to be, what I would say is, slightly change your mindset of thinking, because this isn't a case that, a graduate CV is going to land on your desk and you're going to look at it and it's going to be great, and et cetera, et cetera. You've got to, almost change your mindset and think, well, people need an opportunity. No one is left behind. Often these people have to start behind, and that's where you want to kind of make a difference. The other thing that we can all do, whether we work for a BPO or whether we work on the enterprise side, in any industry, is there's an organisation that are a partner of ours, but they're nothing to do. They're not, part of our organisation, called the GMI, the Global Mentorship Initiative. And what they do is they ask individuals that are in business to give up, so I think it's around about 12 to 14 hours a month to mentor an individual. That might be a young person, it might be someone that's older but has been out of employment for a while. And it's just simply being there and helping this person with any questions or things they may have. And it ranges, Lee, from, how should I dress for an interview? Should I shake the person's hand, all the way through to, well, I've never worked in a team before and they're putting me in a team. Have you got any advice? Also all of these kind of questions that we would take for granted, and they just need help. So the GMI, they do it. And as I was saying to you before, it's really lovely to see that a lot of the people 3 or 4 years ago that were asking these questions and being mentored are now people that have gone full circle and are helping and mentoring other people. So organisations,
and they are best placed to do that because they have been through the process in themselves, so they know which piece of advice really hit home and which piece of advice was useful.
Because we often take it for granted that this person's going to get a job. We're going to give this person an opportunity, and we say welcome to whatever the company is, and we put them on the floor, and that's it. But we have to bear in mind that some of these people, one of the interesting stats is that whilst they all want, a lot of these people want to work, one of the main reasons they leave is because they've never worked in a team before and they don't know how. And so they're kind of not trained on that. They're not brought in and kind of shown, well, this is how you do it. It's taken for granted. So it's important they've got someone to ask these questions too.
John, I love it. And I know that this is something that you care passionately about, impact sourcing. And I know that as part of your role at the Impact Sourcing Alliance, you're really trying to spread the word on this great, can I call it initiative? I'm not sure it's an initiative. It's a way of doing things.
The wheels are in motion. There's another organisation, just lastly, because I'm conscious that we're kind of going over time here, but just one last organisation. There's an organisation called Tent, and Tent specialise in placing displaced refugees. And the people that have signed up to Tent are, and you can have a look for yourself, are global providers on both sides. And some of these organisations have pledged to take anywhere between 500 and 5,000 refugees globally and help give them an opportunity. So what we're trying to do at the Alliance, and what I'm trying to do, and believe me, I'm not the authority on impact sourcing. I've surrounded myself with a lot of smart individuals, people like Tracy Freeman, people like Rita Sonny, people like Debbie Hamill, all of those individuals. And for us, we want to get this being spoken about at board level. You know, it's got to be driven by people. It's got to be spoken about at a high level. The stigma of, oh, you know, it's just helping out, and do we want these people in our organisation? That's so kind of old thinking and you know, wrong to kind of think like that. We want to create an opportunity for these individuals where people are getting meaningful employment. And because of the scale which your members and our clients recruit at, I think that as an industry, we are perfectly placed to do that.
Jon, thank you so much. And for anyone that's listening that wants to look at doing impact sourcing, I'm sure, Jon, you're there at the other end of your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many more people want to hear me speak, because I've just banged on for about half an hour about it. But if anyone wants any information, reach out to me. You can get my details via LinkedIn or through Lee. It's been I can't tell you how grateful I am just to have the opportunity to talk about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jon, and hopefully you found that useful. It's insightful, it's heartwarming, and it's potentially just what our industry needs too. So thank you so much for listening. Take care and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.